Every race except the white race is going through a subconscious dialectical underlying self-hatred for their own race, for their own kind. And the white race hasn't been spared, actually. They are going through white guilt, which is the other spectrum of self-hate. Okay, so today we'll talk about what causes this self-hate in all the other races except the white race, and then what causes white guilt. We actually know the reason what causes white guilt. It has been talked about many times now, and many native people, like many white people, many non-white people have expressed their views on it, and you can check them on YouTube. So I will give my 2 cents at the end on that too. But first of all, let's discuss what creates the underlying subconscious self-hate in the other races. Okay, somewhere this somewhere ties into the current makeup of the world. Okay, if you see the currently the world is not divided as per races, but it's divided as per appearances. Okay, it can be like a certain version of racism as well, you can consider that, but I've always said this, that people are not racist inherently, but people are appearancist inherently. Okay, so the world still is appearancist, uh, and what I mean by that is the world is set up in such a way that the richest countries and the most developed, so-called most developed countries are on the top of the food chain financially and standard of living, quality of life, nature, and everything else. Then comes the yellow countries, then comes the brown countries, and then comes the black countries. Okay, in that shade of brown and Asian and black. Okay, the blackest countries are the poorest, uh, the whiter blacks, the wheatish black countries like North Africa, a bit towards South Africa. They are a bit well-to-do, but the darkest countries are the poorest. Okay, similarly in the Southeast Asian or Asian countries. Okay, the whitest Asian countries are the richest, and the darker Asian countries are poorer. Um, that doesn't apply to India because color is a very broad spectrum in India, throughout India, and you cannot just point that out. But rest of the world, if you see, India also falls on the global spectrum for sure. But India is not divided on the basis of color, at least now it's not, uh, financially. But rest of the world, yes, it is still, and even India in the on the global spectrum. Why is that? Do you think melanin, which controls and regulates the color of your skin, does that have does that also regulate the knowledge of finance that you can grasp, or the knowledge of business that you can grasp, the knowledge of well-being that you can grasp, civilization? And does melanin really trigger all these things? Not really, right? Like it's just a reactionary chemical that your body produces when exposed to sun, to protect you from the sun, and it has nothing to do with financial knowledge and industrialization and poverty and richness and everything, right? So once you grasp the reality of this situation, you will agree to the fact that um, most of how the world is set up is a game plan. It was designed to be that way, and because we are appearancist by nature, we can't do anything. Nature has designed us in that way, or maybe ever since we were born, the surroundings that we grew up in were such that it made us believe in a certain way, that it made us believe lighter was better and darker was not. So that's how the world is set up, and I truly, truly, truly believe that this is by design, because melanin, racial makeup, and ethnicities, these things have no bearing on, your not business knowledge and things like that. Okay, so now someone will might bring the argument that isn't it the same that not everyone can run a marathon, but only Africans can run better marathons? That's because they grow up running marathons. It's not like all Africans can run marathons, right? It's just the Kenyans and the Tanzanians and the East Africans who are running it, because that's they do it on a daily basis since they're born. They run from villages to villages, they run to a school, they run everywhere. Now if you develop that same if you develop those same conditions somewhere else, you might after a few generations also get some athletes who are as good as Africans in the long race running. So yes, genetic makeup helps you to some extent, and there is natural selection also. But again, natural selection, as if you are physically significant enough, your racial makeup might not matter so much, and it will trump your physical makeup. But coming to the point where I was saying that um, the world is appearances, okay, and it's is set up in such a way, and the wealth has been accumulated in the European and the white countries, and this is by design, because the rulers of the world, they currently, I don't know how to explain this without coming across as insane, okay. um you should watch my previous videos to get a grasp on what I'm trying to say, but my theory here is that the world is not free and democratic as we think. It's been governed and owned by a handful of people since the beginning of time, and the beginning of time, I at least go back to um 6 to 7 thousand years. I could arguably even say 10,000 years. Check out my book. It's called The Dead Souls of Atlantis, and it's available on Amazon by Carl Sakura. And read me in more detail there. But just to give you a brief idea, that the world has been governed and has been owned since the beginning of time, and all other means of governance that we see, democracy, communism, and dictatorships, and president rule, and anything else that might also fall in this category, they are just offshoots of um, a main way of governance, which is oligarchy. It's the rule by the few, and the rule by the merchant class, the rule by the bourgeoisie of the society. And that's what's been going on for the last at least 3 to 4 thousand years, since the beginning of the Dark Ages, the real Dark Ages, not the academic 14th 15th century Dark Ages, but the real Dark Ages. Okay, which started after the collapse of the Bronze Age. Look into that as well. The best man to look into this is Eric Klein, and his book called 1177 When Civilization Collapsed, and that he talks about the collapse of the Bronze Age. So even before the collapse, I would say, even before, like, at least 1500 years before the collapse, the powers were shifted to the bourgeoisie, and they have been ruling for a while. So this bourgeoisie was first in the Asian continent. Okay, I cannot now pinpoint where exactly, but this bourgeoisie was first either in India, China, or Indochina, or somewhere in the Asian mainland, and then it moved towards Persia, and then it moved towards Babylon and Iraq and in Sumer and that area, and then it moved towards Phoenicia, which is present day Israel, and that's where it became the strongest. That's where it was um the biggest in size. And I don't have to tell you about Phoenicia separately. You can look into Phoenician merchancies, Phoenician ships, politics, letters, the ABCD that we use today. Those are Phoenician letters, right? No, those are not English, those are not Latin letters, those are created by Phoenicians. So they were really on the top of their game, they're on the top of their literature game, they're on the top of their merchant game, their defense game, their politics game, all of that. And this power, this central power that was ruling the world from Tyre or Phoenicia at that time, suddenly vanished around the collapse of the Bronze Age, and then emerged back as the Roman Empire around 700 600 BC, um, in Rome, in Italy. And then Venice came up 1,000 years later, and then Venice stayed for another 1,000 years, and then came up the British Empire out of nowhere, this small island which just gained power from nowhere. Actually, it's not from nowhere. It's all the Venetian money and Venetian power that was just transferred over to Britain. And then Britain became into the current world new order, which is all of the international or global institutions of control that are set up and the people running it. You know where they are, right? Like in a small country in the middle of Europe. So coming back to the point is that this global oligarchy that is owning the world and that runs the world, that dictates terms for thousands of years, has set up the world in this way. And our education's been set up this way, where we perceive the excellence of the races in the hierarchy of our skin tones. We perceive the IQ of the races in hierarchy of our skin tones. And it's not just because we've been brainwashed. We also get to see it in the physical world, right? Like the European and the Western countries are even visually more developed, financially more developed. But the basic question to ask is melanin or any other chemical in your body responsible for regulating the financial information that really, develops a country, or technological information, or scientific information? How? It's not, right? It's all this whole setup of appearancism, of racial hierarchy is crap. And we know it's crap because look at the temples in India, and look at the pyramids in Africa and Egypt, some of the other megaliths around the world, which we cannot still build today, cathedrals and stuff in we cannot build them today. And how can we even, and they are not in Europe. I mean, some of the cathedrals are, but like the pyramids and temples and the walls of like temples in Asia, not just in India and South America and Incan civilizations, and all of these are not done by Europeans. These are done by previous people, and that's a testament that if we cannot build them today, if they cannot build them today, that means there were smarter people that existed before us, and they were not necessarily from the same race of society, same race of people. So this whole setup of rich white versus poor black is done purposefully to trap you in the spell, and I call it the spell of color. And we are heavily trapped into the spell of color. We're heavily trapped into the spell of appearance. And to get out of the spell of to get out of any spell, the basic necessity is you first slow down the speed of your matrix. You slow down the events happening around you. You cut contact from society, civilization, go in seclusion for some time, and talk to yourself and figure out your own thoughts, filter your own thoughts, polish your personality, and then come out as a new person altogether. This is a chance of a rebirth, actually. You will feel like a new person, and you will feel like leaving, or you feel like you've lived two lives in one single birth, by doing this change. So at the bottom of it, this change actually will get rid of all the self-hatred that you have. Okay, now on the surface you might say, yeah, I don't have any self-hatred, but subconsciously, yes, you might think that yes, you do. And given a chance, you will always prefer to have your next generation with a higher race on the race spectrum, right? Now, call me a liar, but go while before going to bed tonight, ask yourself realistically, in your family, in your surroundings, maybe you don't think the same, but other 95% people in your community will have the same mindset. Okay, there is a hierarchy of race in the world, which is created by this illusion of racial hierarchy. I don't know how to say it, but yes. And every person, or let's say not every, but a good chunk of 90% people will try to marry upwards on the racial spectrum and create an interracial or a biracial next generation if they had a chance. The ones who do not have a chance, yes, of course, they will stick to their own, or the ones who do not even have the potential to interact with any other race, of course, they don't have any other options, and they will then also pride upon their own racial genetic makeup, because they do not have a choice. But given a choice, and if someone has a choice, they're in the West, they're somewhere else, yeah, they are going to um, date up on the racial spectrum. This is just a biological fact, at least at the time, at the current time, it is a biological fact. So that is where the self-hatred comes from the setup of the world that we have today. Okay, I hope I'm trying to make my point clear. So let me know what you guys think. Check out my book, The Dead Souls of Atlantis, uh, on Amazon by Carl Sakura. If you do not agree with me, let me know in the comments why not. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.